Welcome back. There has been a lot that's dropped, and I want to get to those, but let's talk about this album first. And I'll fix the camera here as well. Perfect. So, Ski Mask the Slump God has finally dropped 11th Dimension. Some further context, this album has apparently been in the works for quite a long time. And I remember Ski Mask, even a couple of years ago, put out kind of a list on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, but now X, of all the features he wanted to work with. I think Baby Keem was on there, Yeet was one of them. There was a whole bunch of different artists that he wanted to work with, and this is the album we have finally received. And it feels like forever since we have finally got a Ski Mask project, and in reality, it has been a very long time. The last album, mixtape technically, was Sin City, all the way back, I believe it was in 2020. Had a critic score of a 74 and a user score of a 50. And I can honestly say I only remember one song, and I think it was Merlin Staff, or just Merlin, with Kenny Beats on production. That was the only song of note that I really took from that project. It really didn't feel like a full-on mixtape or even an album at that point. It just kind of felt like very much a throwaway album. Stokely was Ski Mask's first foot forward into his debut album territory, had a critic score of a 73 and a user score of a 66. Stokely was a pretty successful album for Ski Mask. It had a lot of great singles on there, and had a lot of songs that actually stuck around for a good amount of time, had a good amount of streams to them. And again, it just put really the best foot forward for Ski Mask when it comes to his versatility and honestly his commercial appeal, and he really bolstered that with Stokely. So this is his return to the album kind of format, and a critic score of a 50 and a user score of a 63 kind of tells you that it's still kind of falling into the middle with Ski Mask when it comes to his albums. There has been a couple of features on here that we did expect. I know he wanted Future on this, he got him. And Juice WRLD obviously is on this, and then we have the XXXTentacion interlude on here. So there is features on here that we kind of expected besides Skillabang. But this album, for as long as we've waited for this thing, Ski Mask, for me, hasn't really elevated as an artist. And with the sound of this album, of 11th Dimension, it feels a lot more polished. It definitely feels a little bit more kind of refined than the past couple of albums, but I don't know if that's a good thing. I like the rougher kind of approach that we did get moments on Stokely, but in particular on You Will Regret and Beware the Book of Eli. I do really like those first two mixtapes because it has that tenacity, it has that really rough DIY nature to them. And I know that was a very big crux of the Florida sound at the time, especially when you had Little Pump, Smokepurpp, XXXTentacion. You had that kind of rougher sound, and I really like Ski Mask in that sound. But even Stokely, as an example, I feel like he was able to push that forward into something that is a little bit more palatable for a general audience. With this album, I feel like it's too polished, and also it kind of falls into the territory where there is not a real bad track on this. It just falls into this territory of being very boring. And not to mention, too, this album, I think, is the longest he has ever put to an album, about 45 minutes long. And I've kind of figured out that Ski Mask really isn't made for longer albums like that. I think he's meant for more 25 to 30-minute albums, because with his energy, with his sound, I feel like just that little burst of energy is all that you need. And I feel like with 45 minutes of material, a lot of these songs do fall into the background. Now, I will say there is some pretty great songs on here. The beginning song, I believe it's Dragon Tooth or Dog Tooth. I really like that song to start off the project. Earwax is another fun one. The middle portion of this album is probably my favorite, particularly Tuk Tuk is probably one of my favorite songs on here. It brings back that classic kind of Ski Mask energy with the flow. It's very fast. It's very fluid. It's dynamic in its performance. Monsters Inc. with Future is another great example. I think the beat on that is just disgusting. It is so dark, and Future does bring a pretty great performance to it. Honestly, the chemistry between the two, I did not expect it to work as well as it did, but honestly, it worked out pretty well. Wake Up with Juice WRLD is another great example of both of them just having a great chemistry with each other, and I'm so sad that we didn't get to see any future tracks with them together or even an album, because I think that would have been fantastic. But I think overall, I think this album, there's honestly, there's not much to say about this thing. While there is some great tracks on here, I feel like the album is too polished for its own good. It doesn't have the kind of rough around the edges personality that the other albums and mixtapes have had, and it just feels like it's a little bit too long. Again, there's some great songs on here, but overall as an album experience, I think Ski Mask still has some work to do, and especially for waiting for so long as we have had, I expected at least a little bit of growth and a little bit more of dynamics. What Do You Mean, I forgot to mention, is probably the most experimental song in here, and it works out rather well that you get a little bit more of a melodic performance, but you also get a little bit more of a slow-paced flow performance from Ski Mask, something that's a little bit more personal, a little bit more, I guess, kind of vulnerable in its performance, and I think we needed more moments like that. I think we needed more moments of What Do You Mean? And while we still get some of those trademark moments of Ski Mask from older albums on here, I feel like he hasn't really elevated himself to the point where it's really worth going back to. So overall, I think this album is just kind of below average for me. And with that, I'm going to be giving it a 4 out of 10. As much as I want to like Ski Mask, as much as I miss the older projects, and as much as I love that kind of sound that he kind of brought into the mainstream and kind of pioneered alongside so many other Florida artists, there is room for growth. I just don't think Ski Mask has done that with this project. So, what are your thoughts on the 11th Dimension? Do you like it? Do you not like it so much? Leave a comment down below. And thank you very much for watching. There's a couple more reviews I have to make, but I have to listen to the projects first. So I will get to you on those very shortly. But have a good night, and I will talk to you again very soon.